welcome to our 9th session, which is on raising external capital. My name is Vera Fiedor from the University of Ghana Business School. Now, in general, funding forms a very integral part of any business's success. Now, whether the firm is big or small and irrespective of the nature of business, funding is very crucial if the firm is going to stay around for long. So you can say that having access to finance is quite crucial if firms will survive and remain profitable. Over time, firms that begin to grow would have to reach out to the financial markets to raise funds, normally as internal sources like retained earnings become insufficient in fully funding their goals and aspirations. So in walking through this session, we're hoping that at the end, students should be able to explain the basic procedures that go into raising external finance, specifically to the Ghanaian financial market, explain the regulatory environment for the issue of securities, and be able to have a general ability to differentiate between private placement and public office. Now, this is our session outline. We're going to have a basic understanding of the background that leads to raising finance, and then we're going to look at the building blocks, and then we're going to look at how securities are issued in practice and whether it has to do with public office or private placements. So let's move on. Now, generally, securities in Ghana that are issued by corporate bodies either fall in the category of debts or equity. Now, normally these are issued to raise capital to undertake planned projects and activities. Now, bear in mind that these must have positive NPV in order to create value for the shareholders. Now, these securities are initially issued through either a full-blown public flotation or what we refer to as a private placement. Now, in relation to equity capital, these are funds contributed by investors in exchange for ownership rights in the assets of the business. And we normally can raise that through an initial public offer, a private placement, or what we also refer to as a seasoned issue or a rights issue. On the other hand, in raising debt capital, this can be referred to as funds contributed by investments, but only represent a claim on the assets or future economic benefits of firms, governments, and other agents. And normally we raise that through a public offer as well or a private placement, and that can either be structured as a single issue one time or a series of one issue. In that case, we go on to do what we refer to as shelf registration. Now, let's begin to understand the public offer, or in this case, what we refer to as the initial public offer. Now, the initial public offer is usually when a firm issues equity for the very first time to the general public. Now, according to the company's code, the general public here must mean that the number of people who have been targeted is in excess of 50. Now, what are the processes involved? Normally, you must have a strategic decision process that answers the question of why do we need to raise the funds and why do we want to go public. Now, beyond that, the decision process is now brought from management to the board of directors, and then once they give approval, that's when the board gives approval, it now moves on to the shareholders, who are the true owners, who must also give approval. Now, once the shareholders are in sync and also give approval, then the main process starts. We have to now appoint advisors. Now, these advisors, to a large extent, form the consortium that will see to it that the whole process of raising this capital is successful. It doesn't run into hitches. Now, we normally have the lead manager, also known as a transaction manager or the financial advisor or the sponsoring broker. Now, what this person does, or this institution does usually, is to ensure that all the requirements that must be fulfilled by the issuer are done according to the Securities and Exchange Commission's regulations and that of the Ghana Stock Exchange where they apply. They would also ensure that they provide direction to the issuer on the selection of other advisors, meaning that they help in the selection of legal advisors, the reporting accountants, and then the marketing consultants who have to be employed on this mission. They also ensure that they coordinate all activities required to complete the offer process. and also help in providing input on how to price, the timing, and the distribution of the offer, and whether they're going to do that alone or with a selling group. They also help to in fact, they facilitate the process or the relationship between the issuer and regulators to ensure that all approvals are secured, and they are normally responsible for preparing the offer prospectus. So that's for the lead manager. Now, once the legal advisor is also appointed, that role is to ensure that a legal due diligence is conducted. That means that this institution usually will review all legal processes completed by the issuer and ensure that they comply with the company regulations, the Companies Act itself, the listing rules of the stock exchanges, be it the GSE itself or the alternative exchange, ensure that SEC laws are also followed and complied with, and any other regulations that are required to be followed by the issuer, whether it be the Banking Act, the Insurance Act, etc. Now then, we have the reporting accountant who does the financial due diligence. Now that is to review past audited financial information, validate financial projections and models of the issuer, which will in turn then impact the value, and this is required to be disclosed to investors. And then we also have to appoint the publicity and marketing consultants if necessary. Now, this person or this institution will assist the issuer to communicate to potential investors and to help it derive the advertising mileage from the process. Then we also have a receiving bank, usually an escrow account holder, who would manage the receipts from the offer, in which case the money does not go directly to the firm, but it goes to an institution, and once everything is settled, it is transferred accordingly. Now, beyond that, the next process after the advisors have been appointed will be to prepare the offer document or the prospectus. Now, these prospectuses or the offer document must contain the terms of the offer. It must also show that there's compliance with regulatory requirements, and it should contain the relevant certifications of the legal advisor and the reporting accountant, and have all information on pricing methodology, be it the use of discounted cash flows, net worth, or market multiples in arriving at pricing. Then we go on to secure approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then that is to place the offer. And should the firm decide to list, must also seek approval from the Ghana Stock Exchange or from the Ghana Alternative Exchange. Now, we must also book, or what we do, book building or doing marketing and selling the investment opportunity to investors. And once that is successful, we may choose to list on the stock exchange for trading in the secondary market. Now, this is a sample duration of what may go into the public offer. So over a number of weeks, usually duration of about 2 weeks, due diligence and other preparatory elements are undertaken. Now, the responsibility falls on the issuer, the financial advisor, and other advisors. Beyond that, the relevant documentation and information memorandum are also completed and then passed on to the relevant authority for approval, and this usually falls on the lap of the issuer as well as the financial advisor. And then we have marketing and book building, which is also facilitated by the financial advisor and the issuer, among others. And once that is successful and the issue has been done, then we list, and that is also the responsibility of the financial advisor and the issuer. So in general, the whole process may take a period of 20 weeks or more, barring any hitches or legal entanglements that may happen along the way. Now, let's begin to understand, beyond the initial public offer, which is a first-time issue, we may actually have what we refer to as a rights issue or a seasoned offer. Now, this is a firm that is already listed or possibly having shares already issued on the market, issues additional shares to existing shareholders in order to raise equity capital. Now, of course, the terms of the right offer may then relate to the fact that it may either be for a subscription ratio, meaning that for a certain number of existing shares, you are entitled to a certain number of the new shares. So it could be a case of 2 for 1. So for every existing 2 sets of shares a shareholder already has, the person is allowed to be able to subscribe for 1 extra share for the new sets of shares that are being offered. And the types of rights, whether they are renounceable or non-renounceable, meaning that whether you can transfer the rights should you not be able to take up the offer. And of course, the relevant elements that apply to trading of rights on the exchange where they are renounceable rights. So those are some of the elements you should know as far as the rights issue or the seasoned offer is concerned. Now, when it comes to raising debt capital and you want to go the public route, the process involved is similar to the process to raise equity with a few additions. As usual, we will have to make the decision on why they need to raise funds and why they need to raise these debt capital publicly. It must also gain the approval of the board of directors and the approval of shareholders, and then we proceed to appointing advisors. In this regard, we also appoint a trustee who is to safeguard the interest of the debt holders and the issuers. And then we proceed to also go through the same process of preparing the relevant information memorandum or prospectus, secure the relevant approvals, do the marketing and sale to do the book building, and then proceed to listing on the secondary market for trading where relevant. Now, it is not always the case that we may decide to raise external capital, be it debt or equity, by going public. We may actually choose to do that by doing what we refer to as private placement. Now, this is a sale of the financial securities to a restricted list of investors. Now, that means the number is less than 50. Now, for this reason, you do not necessarily need to register with SEC, but the process is also quite similar to a public offer with a few changes. Of course, you have to meet the legal requirements, and that has to do with the company's own regulations on what should pertain in raising external capital. It should comply with the Companies Code Act 179, and then the relevant disclosures must be made to SEC, which is a recent development. You also proceed to appoint advisors, as is the normal case for a public offer as well. You prepare the placement document or the prospectus. You do the marketing and the book building, and then we proceed to the placement. The main relevance here is that because it's not a public offer, there's typically no filing with GSE, there's no publicity and promotional set of activities because this is a restricted offer. Now, when it comes to debt capital, the process is still the same, meaning that you proceed with the relevant legal requirements, appoint advisors, prepare the placement documents, build your books, and then proceed. Obviously, in this case as well, no filing with the GSE, no publicity or promotional activities. Now, that's in general the basic information that requires in raising or issuing external capital as far as Ghana is concerned. But the rules do not significantly differ, but they have to apply to the regulatory environment within whichever jurisdiction that a company finds itself. Thank you for your time for this session. We meet in the next.